Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast. Hey, future wealth builders. Welcome to another episode of the New Wealth Wave podcast. Today, we have a very special guest in the studio. Yes, you see that beautiful soul on the other side of the camera. And if you don't know who she is, I'm going to tell you who she is as well. But before we get to that, if this is your first time tapping into New Wealth Wave podcast, make sure you subscribe and you can tap on the link and download a PDF of the generational wealth model. Now, let's get to the guest. Whew, man, I am so excited to have this beautiful soul on our podcast. She has a career that has spanned 38 Broadway seasons. LaChanze consistently brings women of complexity and triumph into the cultural lexicon. She has won the Tony Award for Best Actress in a leading role in a musical in 2006 for a role as Celie Harris Johnson in The Color Purple. In 2023, LaChanze received two more Tony Awards, this time as a producer. She served as a co-producer on Kimberly Akimbo, which won the Tony for Best New Musical, and Top Dog Underdog, which won for Best Revival of a Play. Let's welcome to the studio, LaChanze.
Hello.
I mean, you've done so much, but let's get to some more accolades. We talked about you winning the Tony Award as well, but on screen, you have delivered memorable roles in both TV and film, including East New York, The Blacklist, Handel's Messiah Rocks, A Joyful Noise, Emmy Award, Melinda, The Help, HBO's The Night of, Law and Order, SVU, The Good Fight, which is one of my favorite, and Disney animated feature film Hercules, among other titles. You're also the president of Black Theater United, a community of creatives dedicated to awareness, accountability, and advocacy. Proud mother of Celia Rose, Zaya as well. You reside in Westchester, New York, and I didn't know that you had 3 cats. And you have the green thumb as well with the gardening hat. Again, welcome to the show. So before we get into the heavy lifting, please tell us a fun fact about yourself that no one would know.
A fun fact about me, when you asked me this, I was like, okay, what is going to be the fun fact? Because I like to think there are a lot of fun facts in addition to my gardening and my cats. Every morning, this is something you won't Google, I go outside in my backyard and I stand barefoot in the ground and with my feet on the ground, no matter what season it is, so that I can get grounded to the earth.
You know, I was just reading something about grounding as well. So before we get again to the heavy lifting of it all, let's kind of first just talk about how this relationship kind of happened, because it's interesting how we met.
It is.
And so, that's why you have to travel, right? Because you just never know. Me and my wife were on vacation in Portugal, of all places. You're on vacation in Portugal. And so, I seen you talking to my wife.
Yeah.
And the commonality was that you guys have a common friend, which was so ironic. You have a common friend, Caroline. I'm going to send a shout out to Caroline out there, a common friend. And we start talking. And it was so interesting because my wife, she said, come over. She said, come over. I said, oh, okay. All right. Who is this person? And she says, this is the person that played the first Celia. I'm like, oh my God. Right. And what's so cool about it is that you said, well, I'm here in Portugal. I'm by myself. And we're saying, well, we just got here. We're by ourselves. Guess what? Let's hang out.
Yes, sir.
And you said, fine, let's hang out. And it was interesting because we're trying to figure out, where we're going. And then I'm going to let you kind of take over the story. We're trying to figure out where to go. And then who are you texting and who in your circle kind of gave us the blueprint on what to do in Portugal?
I almost forgot about that part, King, Dr. Wallace, because I was feeling like, well, I'm here in Portugal because I have friends who have bought property there. And one of my friends happened to be Audra McDonald. So I called Audra and I'm texting Audra. I'm like, girl, what to do? Please give me the 411 on the best restaurants, the best sites to see. And she immediately hits me back with a list of all the things. And I'm showing them to you and Jamel. And I'm like, wait a second. They were like, is that Audra McDonald texting you? I'm like, yes, it is. Because Audra and we've known each other for, oh my God, well over 30 years now, because we're both in this commercial theater community. But she's also just happens to be one of my close friends. And she told us where to go, gave us all the highlights. And we sure enough went to visit that castle on her recommendation. And it was a great day, I would say. It was a great day.
The castle was so interesting because we actually went to a castle, which was great. Portugal is beautiful. I'm going to move to Portugal. We're moving to Portugal. I'm telling you that now. We was having dinner one night and it was a theater. And I said, okay, this is where LaChanze, myself, Audra, we can go work in this theater because, I can do the music and then you can do the acting and we can have a career in Portugal as well. But, we start talking because there was no pressure. I recall you asked me, you said, so what do you do? And I said, well, I do voiceover work. And I said, I have a podcast. And, you perked up like, oh, okay, you had a podcast. And I told you about the podcast itself. Once I mentioned the podcast to you, the focus of it all, and we'll get into the focus first time listeners as well. You was like, this is so impactful. I'm going to come on your show because this relates to me. So this kind of let the listeners know, what was your first initial when you heard about it? Why was it so important to you and why did it resonate?
We hear about financial health and wellness all the time, but the way you described what you do on this podcast struck me like it wasn't just, oh, that's a wonderful idea. I almost had a visceral reaction to it because you spoke to my emotional reaction to wealth. I've just never even considered the emotions of wealth and how we relate to it. So when you said that, I felt like I went from this woman of a certain age to a 7-year-old child. I felt like I immediately went back to my childhood because it was an emotional response that I had to it that made me think, oh my God, I got to come on this podcast because you just mentioned it and I felt like I was in therapy. From the moment you said it, I thought, oh my God, I'm in therapy. I got to be brave. I got to go find out what this is about and find out what my own issues are and where I am on your 7 stages model. I just feel like this is something that's very important. And I want to find out exactly where I am today. Dr. Wallace?
We're going to do the best we can to kind of break it down. For those first-time listeners on the New Wealth Wave podcast, let me give you a breakdown of what LaChanze is talking about. So the New Wealth Wave podcast is based on my 7-stage generational wealth model, which focuses on 3 phases of our lives: the past, the present, and the future. So let's talk about the model itself. So stage 1 focuses on our internal and external ecosystem. Stage 2 focuses on our financial genetic code, which targets both trauma and anxiety. Stage 3 is financial healing. Very important. This is where we reprogram or give you ideas to reprogram stages 2 and 1. Stage 4 is financial edification. We speak about financial literacy and inclusion. Stage 5 is financial well-being. Now, let me give you a description of financial well-being. This is your soft landing. This is your retirement. This is, as LaChanze mentioned, your financial wellness, your financial health. And this is where you really focus on not outliving your income. So that's so important. Stage 6 is generational knowledge. I firmly believe that generational wealth begins with generational knowledge and creating your financial footprints to get to stage 7, which is generational wealth. So that's the model itself. Again, if you want to get a PDF copy of that, tap on the link as well, and you can download a copy of that. Now, okay, here comes the heavy lifting now. Are you ready for the heavy lifting?
I don't know.
Okay, here we go. Here we go, right here. So I usually ask our studio guests 3 questions to start the entire process. So first question is, before becoming such an accomplished actress, where were you on the 7-stage generational model?
When I was looking at this question, I was thinking I pretty much am 1, 2, and 3 kind of altogether. But I think 2, if I had to say specifically where I am on the model before I became an actor, was 2, solidly 2. It was the external ecosystem that pretty much told me who I was and where I am financially. So I would say 2 is definitely where I am.
Sounds good. So, now knowing that, now you're at this stage. Obviously, you're well accomplished. We went through your bio. You're one of the tops of doing this. So what was your aha moment that made you realize that, I have to make change? Change is imminent.
Not to take the conversation into something that's sad, but I lost my husband very early in our marriage. He died when my children were very young. I was actually pregnant with my second one at the time. My oldest was 1 year old. So, I married a guy in finance and I'm an actor because I wanted wanted stability in my life. I wanted my family to have the stability. And being a Black girl in America whose father was not in the picture the whole time, we have so many stories of that. He was there, but they divorced when I was rather young. So he wasn't really there. So one of my main issues as a young woman building her family was I did not want to be a single mom. I was like, there's no way I am raising my two little chocolate brown girls in this country without a male figure to protect them and provide for them. So when my husband died, very early into our lives together, I was devastated. It was a moment for me. Talk about aha. It was okay. Everything that you have thought about, the plan that you made that you were going to set up, because I didn't have a backup plan. My husband was my plan. When he was gone, I had to figure out how am I going to raise these two girls by myself as an actor without my husband. And the aha was you have to refocus how you're going to live your life and prioritize your income alone.
LaChanze, it's always one particular moment or a series of moments that you realize like, okay, this is my aha moment. And most of the guests that come into the studio, it's usually surrounded around either kids, firstborn kids. That was their aha moment that they knew that they had to make a change. So with that being said, we know what the model looks like. As of today, where do you believe you're located on the model?
It's kind of embarrassing to even say, but I think I'm kind of still at 2, maybe 3, 2 with some sprinkles of 3. Can I say that?
You can say anything you want to say.
Okay, because I think I'm 3, but every now and then I go back to 2. I'm kind of 2.5. I'm 2.5.
You 2.5? You remember I'm 2%. So you remember that, right? That's an inside joke, 2%. We can get to that to a different episode. So you're 2.5. I'm 2%, right? Okay. So we know what that's all about. So what's cool about the model is that, we've had guests on and you talk about oscillating back and forth. You're always consistently on one of the 6 stages, not the 7th stage, but one of the 6 stages. And an event can happen in your life and you oscillate back and forth. So today you may be at 5 because financial well-being, but then something happens, then you go right back to stage 2. What you call a financial flashpoint may have come into play that you start thinking about that as well. Don't feel bad about that because I'm still navigating through the model itself. We're all navigating through the model itself. Some of us go clockwise, some of us go counterclockwise, some of us go right across. That's the purpose of the model, is just to give you a snapshot of where I'm at today. And these are the instruments, so to speak, that I can use to kind of move forward. But again, we're constantly navigating those 6 stages. So when I introduced the model to you, you felt all the components. This is important because we know, especially in marginalized communities, we know finance is something that we just don't talk about. It's close to the best, right? One of the things that you mentioned to me was that you said, listen, I want to come on because I want to let people know that this is real and it's something that we don't talk about. But tell us, a person in your position, why do you believe that, you being able to talk about this, what will this do in the industry itself for people that look at the show that respect you and, just love what you do?
People think that actors, they see us in film and television and on stage, and they see us on red carpets and we're taking pictures and we're always out and about. But again, that's a part of our lives. So we have to be out and about all the time because it is a part of the industry. People say to me all the time, LaChanze, you're so busy, you're so busy, you're so busy. And I say it's because you're seeing what I'm doing. If I had a snapshot into your life every day and saw what you did, I might say that, oh my God, Dr. Wallace, you're so busy, you're so busy. But it's just that my life is forward facing. It looks like on the outside that I'm flown everywhere. I'm treated like a celebrity. I get glammed up all the time. What people don't realize is that it costs a lot of money to maintain that. To maintain that quality of life, you have to have pretty much a whole team. It's not just me going to work, doing a job, and coming home. I need a makeup artist. I need a hairstylist. I need a stylist. I need a driver. I need an assistant. I need an associate. I need an agent. I need a manager. I need a booking manager. And that's 9 people on staff just so I can do what I do. Those are 9 salaries or commissions. Those are 9 people that look to me for their livelihood. And when you think about it, I'm just an actor. So at the time, when I first started out, it was like I was going to work like everyone else, reporting to a boss, getting a paycheck after I did my work. That was my job. I would take my paycheck, come home, and decide what to do with it. The difference is with actors and creatives, that paycheck isn't every week. You may have that check, may get a job, and it'll run for, let's say, 6 months. So for 6 months, I'm getting a weekly check. After that 6 months, I'm out of work. So for most of an artist's life, we call it get it and spread it. You get that money when you can, you hold on to it, try to budget so that it can run the whole entire year. But again, you're still waiting for someone to call you and ring that phone so that you can get the job, which puts us as creatives in this perpetual state of anxiety of like, oh my God, am I going to get another job? After you've paid your 9 employees, you still got to pay your mortgage, your children's education, whatever it is. And all of this leads to a sense of, a money grab. You're constantly like, where am I going to get the money from? That's why I said I'm at 2, because the external ecosystem is what I'm responding to. I'm constantly feeling like I'm paying catch up. And the higher you go, maybe I made $300 one week and then, time went on and I made maybe $1,000 a week or whatever it is. The increments of the amount of money still increases. Even though it increases, you still have more people to pay. So where when I was making $300 a week as a young actor, I didn't have an assistant. I didn't have all those people. But now I have all this visibility and all these expectations. I need a staff to keep doing what I do. So the more money I earn, the more money I spend. Therefore, I'm constantly in this position of what the external ecosystem is providing for me. So that's why I said 2.
Well, and that's interesting because, again, when we look or we think of those entertainers, athletes, or things of that nature, it's the regular person too, the person that's working, we're all going through and we're basing our anxiety on what was passed down to us, unbeknownst to us, generationally willed upon us, because many of us never really had any financial education. So, our first financial fiduciaries were our parents, uncle, aunties, cousins, whoever the case may be, who would give us information. It may not be right, but they would give us information. And we carried that throughout. Where you started at, now you're where you're at today. I'm sure that oftentimes you constantly go back, probably one of those conversations come into play, and you remember that. You remember those conversations like, oh my God, I have to do this. I got to rob Peter to pay Paul. And granted that you are at a high standard today, status level, but at the same time, those financial traumas and anxieties are real and they follow you through. The problem we have, though, is that we never talk about it, right? It's one of those things, it's like a taboo. We don't talk about it. We talk about everything. We talk about having any illness, I'm sick, we talk about that, tax person, whatever goes on in our lives, but we don't talk about money, right? And so it's so emotional. In that stage 3 that you mentioned, that's the cleansing part, so to speak, that you got to recognize what's going on, and then you can move forward. So, with that said, let's transition into stage 1 of the model. Now, considering that money, financial wellness, and education are rarely discussed, as you mentioned earlier, particularly in our culture, please walk us through the remembrance of the lessons you learned about money in any cultural influences that you can recall, just something that you can recall in your internal ecosystem growing up.
Well, we grew up poor. My family, I would say I was born into a poor family, but my mom and my dad, he was military. So I would say more working class once my dad and my mom got together. So then my mom and dad separated when I was about 12 years old, when I was really starting to understand that when dad left, our situation just really went down. Because first it was, we had a home and, I was going to a nice school, but then my parents separated and then we had to go live with my uncle for a while. But then my mom moved us into our own place. But she was a single woman raising 4 children and it was very, very difficult. So my first, I want to say, lessons about money or what was generationally passed down to me was that you have to work so hard. My mother worked like maybe 3 jobs and I was, being the eldest, her help. I was her support. So she was at work, I'd make dinner and I was young. I would get my brothers and sisters up for school. I would help make breakfast. I would help them with their homework because it was just me and my mom for a few years before she remarried. So I learned that in order to eat, dress, do anything you need to do, you have to work. And what I mean by work is whatever the work is. It's like, from McDonald's to gardening, anything you can do, whatever you can do to get money, that's what you did. Subsequently, when I turned 14, I went to get my first job because it was old enough to work in the state of Connecticut. And I did it because I wanted independence, financial independence from burdening my mom. But again, that lesson of the only way you can really have any sort of money is to work. But I was never taught about the quality of work. It was just work. It was like, whatever job you can get. And one of my jobs was just so funny. I was a telemarketer when I was in high school for a cemetery. I was a telemarketer for a cemetery. Talk about taking any job you can get. And we had a great slogan. It was really terrible because we would call these senior citizens and tell them that they were just awarded a free cemetery plot. And it really wasn't a free cemetery plot. It was a buy one, get one free, but you had to buy one. Anyway, you know what the slogan was? We are the last ones to let you down.
And that was the start of your voiceover career.
That was the start of it. That's right. But that was, again, work. I chopped vegetables for General Electric in their kitchen. I did everything. But it was because I saw my mom working so hard. So I thought that's how you survive, working hard instead of smart. That was the difference.
That's interesting. And we'll get to the second part of that question because, I remember we were on vacation and I said, well, you're at this point in your career and your life, whatnot. And you said, I just work because, we get to that point, we go back to that stage one and that stage two, regardless of what someone else may believe in your mind's eye. No, I don't have enough money. No, these are things I have to do because that's what you were brought up on. So you was brought up in scarcity of resources. And when you have scarcity of resources, you're always trying to make sure that you don't go back to that, which is so important. It could be good and it could be bad. At some point, you may say, you know what, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to travel to Portugal. I'm going to go to, wherever I'm going to go and really enjoy my life. But that's a mindset that you have to kind of get because you're still oscillating back and forwards within the model itself. So let's go to the second question. So in the external ecosystem, we talk about their relevant components, education, healthcare, and remote environment. So with that being said, when you walked out the door, so internal, I claim it as walls in, external as walls out. What was your image and idea of what success and what wealth looked like?
Well, to me, financial success was the ability to own your home, to be able to provide for college education without having to get a loan for your children, and to be able to have a car that's yours and not borrowed or leased, rented or anything. And like the basic needs for me is what I thought being financially secure was. And so coming out of that door, out into the world and seeing so many people that are in the same position that I am, but at different stages financially, it made me realize that, I am in this world. I've earned some money now. I see what this is, but I still feel like I haven't gotten it yet. You know what I'm saying? So I felt extremely competitive when I walked out the door because now I need to show up and really show up for myself, for my family, and just really, really earn financially. So but it goes back to number one for me because number one is what was motivating me to be at a certain level in number two.
That's so interesting. And I love how you're being transparent. Future Wealth Builders, we have LaChanze. Yes, that's her on the other side of the screen as well. She's taking time out of her busy schedule to walk us through the 7-stage generational wealth model. And I am so pleased to have her on because this is one of the episodes that we wanted to move away from having experts to come on and give us information. What I always felt that this podcast would be its best version is we can bring real people on who can talk about their 7 stages, people that you recognize, because then it makes the conversation a credible conversation for one, but it makes it an easy conversation, something that we always should have. So make sure that you subscribe to the New Wealth Wave podcast. We have a ton of episodes. You can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all of the social media outlets. Make sure that you subscribe to the New Wealth Wave podcast. We feel we have some really good content. So, what you spoke about is is we talk about learned helplessness and
Mm,
self-sabotage. Typically,
mm.
that comes out of that stage 1 and stage 2, simply because when you have learned helplessness, you already have a defeated mentality. And what you was able to do and take that, you're shaking your head, but what you was able to do, you took that stage 1, that mentality, and it fueled you. Mentioned that you're so competitive, and that for you it worked out extremely well. But we have some people that take that learned helplessness and able to move forward. That self-sabotage, when you kind of sabotage your own success. And I'm sure you've seen that in the industry as well, where people say, well, the only thing that person has to do, but they go through this self-sabotage because they go back to their stage 1 of their lives. I mean, I'm not asking you, have you dealt with that, but has that something that creeped in your mind versus learned helplessness and self-sabotage?
Yes. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I definitely would revert back to the lessons that were passed down to me from my mom and my family and everything around me. Again, we were poor. My mom would take us shopping and we would think, because how we do is we think we're kings and queens no matter how much money we have. And so my mom would take us to the hand-me-down, to the second store, and she would like go crazy when we were little kids. We were like, this is great. We didn't know that we were shopping at like a Salvation Army. We didn't know. We were just little kids. So that idea of this is how much you are worth, when I realized it, I was like, I will never go back to that. Because we were poor and I identify with being a poor person in the world. And I didn't even consider this until I started seeing your questions, Dr. Wallace. The way that I would manage that feeling of lack is by needing to buy things and spend money. I mean, I'll never forget, I shot my first pilot and I made, for me at that time, a few $1,000s. And I was like, woohoo, I'm rich. I can do whatever I want because I made 5 figures and I can go travel. I can buy a car, buy an apartment. No one told me, while it seemed like a lot of money in one big sum, it wasn't really a lot of money because my understanding of what a lot of money was so limited. So that was a sabotage that I believe I had, was if I received $100 and I was walking outside and I saw some cute shoes for $79.99, I would buy them and then have $20 left and try to figure out why I don't have any money. I needed to get that immediate gratification of, oh, but these little shoes are so cute, got to have them, and then found out that now I'm left with $20. What am I going to do with this, even though I got my cute shoes on? So my self-sabotage was overcompensating for a feeling of lack inside. And that's what I battle with. Not so much today, but that's what I struggled with. That was my version of self-sabotage.
That's a great question, because that leads us into stage 2 of the generational wealth model. So we talked about financial anxiety. You talked about self-sabotage. We talked about financial flashpoints, these things that trigger you to go into this anxiety. Could you mention, do you have any financial flashpoints that would happen and then you would immediately go back to your stage 1 in the model?
Oh, yes. So I feel like we're in therapy, Dr. Wallace. Yes, yes, yes. So while I am also a very optimistic person, I'm going to see the glass half full. So even if I don't have the money that I think I deserve, I act as if I have it. And that's a bit of a problem because it may not be in the account, but if I already spent the money that I'm getting next week, and that's when like I'll commit to something. I'll say, oh yeah, we're going to go, and this is not so much today, but on my journey, I would say on my girlfriends, maybe in my early 30s or something, hey, let's go away for a girls' weekend. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. And I may not have the money in my bank account, but I know in 2 weeks I'll get my checks and I'll have the money. So I start spending money that I don't even have in my account yet, because I know I'm going to get it. But that is really bad financial management, because always, not sometimes, inevitably always something will come. And that whole model that I had for getting that money, I forgot while I'm planning for this trip. I'm forgetting that, oh, but your health insurance is due or your car insurance is due and you didn't plan for that. So for me, it was really a lack of budgeting and planning. It was just, and it always would flip me back to number 1.
That's interesting. And I tell a lot of my clients, you have to live today and plan for tomorrow. And it's that fine balance, because tomorrow isn't promised. We know that. So you have to enjoy life today. And we know people, that has happened. You say, oh my God, I didn't know that. What happened? I was just talking to the person yesterday. This happened, right? So it's that fine line that you have to live today, plan for tomorrow. But here is the key to it all. What happens when you get to tomorrow, right? So you got to always plan for that day, right? Many people talk about trauma, and trauma is people think about trauma. They think about something that's been done to them, something a little bit, more in terms of trauma, PTSD, if you will. But PTSD can be related to finance as well, too. And so with that being said, growing up in your situation, scarcity of resources, obviously that's always going to trigger you. But how does that relate to your childhood experience moving into adulthood? Now you're an adult, you've dealt with those traumas. Would you like to share some childhood financial traumas that you experienced with our listeners?
So I mentioned earlier that my parents divorced. I was 10 years old and it was final when I was 12. But when I was living with my dad, we were solidly middle class. So we had a house. I'll never forget, we lived in this one complex where there was actually even a pool in the complex when we lived in Maryland. We had 2 cars. We always had nice things. But when my parents separated and we had to move to live with my uncle, I went from being in a community that was predominantly Black, but middle class, I would say. It was in Prince George's County, Maryland. It was solidly like middle class, almost upper middle class. And we went from there to where I was so poor. Like, my father went off to live somewhere else with another family. And me and my mom and my siblings, we were just like, we really had to live on the first floor of a 2-family apartment home. And I had never experienced anything like that before. So my trauma of feeling like I could have whatever I wanted went from that financial security to having to help my mom out with my brothers and sisters. That was traumatic for me. I had to learn how to adjust, and I even saw myself differently, and it affected my internal identity almost, because I thought that I was one level of a person, and my mother still tried to maintain our self-esteem, but externally I could see that we were very poor. We lived across the street from the projects. I mean, it was just a very different experience for me when my parents divorced.
It's interesting because you're kind of touching on Maslow's 5 hierarchies of need. First one is physiological, second one is safety, third is social, fourth is self-esteem, and the fifth one is self-actualization. And you mentioned a couple of times in terms of self-esteem, because that's so important. Social self-esteem, self-actualization, having the right people around you, so to speak. And you also talked about, when you were speaking about when you had money you felt you needed to spend, you needed to catch up, which is called fear of missing out, FOMO. And so you had that situation. Brad and Ted Klans talks about, in terms of their money scripts, 4 scripts itself: money avoidance, money focus, money status, money vigilance. And when you mentioned that, I really went to money focus, because at one point in your life, some of the definitions of it, some of the key points of money focus is more money will make you happy, which we know that's not true. Money gives you opportunity, but it doesn't make you happy. The other one, there will never be enough money, right? Because you're constantly working, knowing that there'll never be enough money. Because the fear of missing out, I need to do this, that, and the other. And you can never have enough money. And also, money will solve all problems. Money will not solve all problems. And in this industry itself, people, you work with people who are at that money focus, thinking that money will solve all problems, and it will not. Now, what money will provide you is opportunity, but it will not solve all problems. So now let's move over to stage 3. But before we go there, Future Wealth Builders, we are excited to have 3-time Tony Award winner LaChanze to the New Wealth Way podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, as you can find us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and all of the major social media platforms. So here's one for you. You've made it. 4-time Tony Award winner, right? I mean, you're doing some great stuff. We're going to get to that later on, but you've made it. How much pressure is it on you when you made it? Because so many people around you, we're not talking about people that work for you. We're just talking about people that grew up, your family, friends, cousins. How tough is it for you to navigate that space? Because now they believe that you need to help them because you've made it.
Well, that is exactly how my life has been from a very young age. I am probably, in my family, on both sides of my family, well, no, not on my father's side. On my mother's side of the family, I am probably the person who went out and earned a significant amount of money money to the point where I became the resource for so many of my family members in need. And as a young woman, I just thought it was my job, like it's my responsibility. I'm the one with the money. This is my family. It is my job to help my family. It is my responsibility to make sure that, since I am living at a certain level, that my family needs to be living at the same level, even though I have not really earned enough to save, because every time I would get it, I would have to share it with siblings or parent, even my mom, or in some cases, extended family, like cousins or people that live not even in my same state, like aunts and uncles who needed help, financial help. And the feeling of obligation and not being able to just provide for myself was very heavy on me. I think that's also culturally for us as Black people in America. We know that if there's one person in the family that's doing well, everyone in the family will go to that person. And so that's been my experience. And it has been that way for most of my adult life. It took me getting to, I want to say, stage 5 in my life, where I really realized and understood that you are not my responsibility. I may be able to help, but that emotional trauma that I experienced, that anxiety and stress about the money that I have, it almost felt guilty to have it and not share it. So I ended up sharing so much that I didn't have much left for me until I got to stage 5, where I understood if I do not start changing the way that I view money, I'm going to not have anything at all. So I ended up saying no. And as a Black man, you know how hard it is to say no to a family member who is asking you for some money. Now you stuck up. Oh, so now you better than me now, huh? Oh, okay, I get it. And only the family can talk to you like that. You got that one family member that you're almost afraid of, so you give it to them anyway because you don't want to hear from them. I got that family member too that I cannot say no to. Even today, it's just learned behavior, like to your point about generational, the trauma, the stress, the anxiety that's around money, it's palpable. And so when I give it to someone, it actually feels like a relief because I don't have to deal with the stress or the guilt of I have and I'm not sharing. But it took me a lot of learning to realize and to unlearn some of that behavior, to understand that this is not that I am a bad person or that I'm being selfish. I learned that this is what I need in order to provide, to maintain a quality of life for me and my girls.
And that's interesting because, the stage 3 is about reprogramming your financial genetic code. So what's cool about this is that you're doing it. You're at that point right now, reprogramming. Well, you have reprogrammed your financial genetic code based upon your stage 2 and stage 1. Unbeknownst to you, you didn't know that was stage 3 of the model, right? Which is awesome. So it really does bring the model humanistic. I appreciate that you're saying that. But that's so important because that reprogramming that you're experiencing, that you're going through right now is propelling you to get to stage 4 and stage 5, as you mentioned, without feeling so guilty. So we're going to go right into stage 4. So we talk about financial literacy and financial inclusion. I firmly believe that financial literacy is a Band-Aid. To me, it's not giving you the holistic approach. Most individuals talk about financial literacy. It's a linear process. My model says it's holistic because you may have some financial literacy, but at the end of the day, your literacy still can fall in the hands of the stage 1, stage 2, and you can find yourself oscillating back. But to me, the key, yes, I need some literacy, but inclusion is so important. Inclusion says I'm able to participate. I'm able to invest. I'm able to take advantage of my 401k or qualified plans, buy homes, passive income, long-term care, life insurance, all the things that we say no, right? We don't want to do that, right? Because that means I'm adulting, so to speak. But for the most part, talk to us about where you're at in terms of stage 4 and how you've used that to prepare you to get to stage 5, which is financial well-being.
I was on a very specific journey. I had a broker. I had someone that was helping me work on my financial literacy in 2006, I think. Yes, 2006. I was on Broadway. I was Celie in The Color Purple. I was earning. I was doing really well. and I was investing in the stock market and I was investing in all of bonds and all of this. And then I took some bad advice about finances. I had invested in some really bad stock. And, again, because I had no one around me to teach me the basic structure of how money works. So I had a friend who said, you should invest in this. I think it's going to be great. And I was like, okay, great. So I did what they said. I lost the money. Then someone else said, you should put all your money over here. After that happened. And then 2008 happened and I lost a lot of my money. So then it was, well, if you don't buy a home, mortgage a home. And so I was like, okay. So I mortgaged my home and then the home ended up costing twice as much as when I could have just bought it. It was just a very, very difficult learning curve for me about the model of financial literacy, because while it is a very specific model and it's kind of basic, it doesn't always apply to every individual. So I can't say that, if you get $50,000 and someone says, oh, you got to put it in the market. That was a bad move for me. I put it in the market and I lost half of it. So then I took the rest out and I thought, okay, now what am I going to do with what I have left? And I ended up doing things that were helpful, but again, trying to reestablish the wealth that I had accrued up to that point. When I wished that if I had a person in my life or financial knowledge to spread my portfolio, I would have known that you can't put it in one area and expect it to grow. You got to diversify. And to your point about passive income, I never even just considered what that would be, or even if I have to look at passive income or what else can I have going for me in the background to help sustain my life when in between those stages when I'm not being cast in a show or cast in a movie or whatever. Those people just don't understand that it's like you're employed one day, you're unemployed the next. You're employed another day, you're unemployed another. So the financial literacy structure that exists that everyone talks about just didn't fit my lifestyle, Dr. Wallace. It just didn't. I couldn't trust it. I couldn't rely on it in the way that everyone says you should be able to. I had that broker telling me to do certain things. He even told me, you should sell your home and invest the money in this and buy an apartment. I was like, wait a second. So I can't garden? You trying to tell me I can't get up in the morning and go do my gardening? I like to garden. I'm not selling my home. Again, it was one other person's opinion on how I should spend my money, but not considering who I am, the wealth that I have accrued, what I need to prepare for, and how my trajectory of life lines up with that model.
And I echo the same thing, is that financial literacy can be financial shaming. Financial literacy is a cookie cutter approach. Here's the things you need to be able to do. But again, as you mentioned, everybody is different and you can't assume that one person is the same. And I think that's where the industry fails, constantly promoting just financial literacy. But there's so much more that my model kind of talks about it. We have to talk about these other components because yes, I can give you some literacy, but at the same time, you have some serious trauma. You have some serious anxiety. You haven't reprogrammed your financial genetic code. There's so much that goes on that can be stifling for you to be successful. So let's move into stage 5. So stage 5 is financial well-being. This is where you're at financial well-being, where you can absorb a financial crisis. You have financial health. I mean, you look great. So that part, you're not stressing on that, I don't think, but we never know. But you got great energy. So from that perspective, it looks as though you're fine in terms of financial well-being. But financial well-being basically suggests that LaChanze can go to Portugal, can meet me and my wife, and have no financial concerns. Anything that happens, I can absorb that because that's where your stress comes into play. That's your soft landing. Those are things that you do. You prepare in stage 4 to get to stage 5. So my argument says this: if I'm not able to handle stage 1, 2, and 3, it can be a challenge to get to stage 5. But you've already said, I've started reprogramming my financial genetic code unbeknownst to you by saying no, by looking at myself as the most critical asset, so to speak. So you're at stage 5 right now. Here's a question for you. Everyone has a different opinion of what financial well-being is. So in your perfect world, what do you see as the soft landing for yourself?
Not having to worry about any long-term, this is a tough one. As you can see, I'm having some emotional reaction to this. because you done tapped into my emotions. I would have to say it's making sure that I have no mortgage, no bills, no like long-term bills. Like I don't have any debt, any loans. I don't want any sort of debt or loans. I want anything that I have like that completely paid off, and the ability to continue to earn but grow my wealth, meaning buy another home or buy some more property, or I have a deep passion for sailing. And one day I kept saying, oh, I'm going to buy myself a boat. I'm going to buy myself a boat. Personally, that's when I know I've made it, when I have my boat. But people have said a boat is a bad investment. So that's another conversation, Dr. Wallace. That's another episode. But to not have to worry about bills, everything to just be covered, where I can then begin to look at other areas, and we can get that property in Portugal, because that's where we're going to retire, right? So I'm going to need, my number 5 is being able to buy my place in Portugal. Okay. That's my number 5. That's how I feel like that is the perfect scenario for me.
Like I said, I've already located the theater that we can work in. You bring your girl Audra over there as well. I can do the music, and we're going to be all good in Portugal, because I'm going. That's my stage 5, me and my wife. And if you don't, listen, we have a room for you anyway. Okay. And we can get Ivan to drive us around.
Now, this is the plan I'm talking about.
That is your stage 5. So, future wealth builders, we are excited to have 3-time Tony Award winner LaChanze to the New Wealth Way podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, as you can find us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and all the major social media platforms. So now we're at stage 6. This is where I say generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. So there's 3 things that you have to plan for. You have to plan for living too long, dying too soon, and becoming disabled along the way. Those are 3 things that you have to plan for. So, future wealth builders, if you're meeting with an advisor and they're not asking you those questions, they're not really diving into living too long, meaning outliving your income, stage 5, dying too soon, and disabled along the way, those are important. That's generational wealth begins with generational knowledge, because we know we have to create the financial footprints to pass down our assets to our beneficiaries. So important. How important do you believe that is for you and those within the industry?
You know, it's hard to answer this question, Dr. Wallace, because you're asking me a question as if people in my industry talk about this, and we don't. We just don't. No one talks about family planning, the passing down for our beneficiaries. No one talks about preparing for the future in the way, even life insurance, retirement plan, 401k. No one talks about it. And so the world of entertainment is very present. It's very immediate. Like everyone's living in the moment solidly. And so when you even ask me that question, I get that feeling in my belly of like, I don't know if I'm doing it enough. And there is shame attached to it, because the way I see myself and my work is now. It's current. This is what you're doing today, and you have to do it at 100%. And then you got to go to sleep, get up in the morning, and do it again at 100%. Now, I know I can speak and say, yes, I have prepared for my children. Yes, I have prepared for my future. Yes, I have done these things, but it doesn't speak to the feeling that I have inside about listening to you speak. Have I done it enough? Have I done it the right way? Have I considered, the amount, like you say, to prepare for the being disabled, you said, living too long, not living long enough, of becoming disabled along the way, right?
Let me add this to that. When I meet with my clients, LaChanze, I would say to them, before we get into the numbers, we sit down and I would ask them, I would basically say, listen, you're going to live too long, die too soon, and become disabled along the way. Okay, we know that. So what we don't always plan on is becoming disabled along the way, because there's a less than 1% chance that we're going to pass today, less than 1%. Okay. But it's a 20% or higher chance that we're going to become disabled along the way. And that's the one that we don't really plan for, because at some point we know that the cost for that. And people in your industry that was doing well. We know people, family, friends who didn't prepare for that. And so now it's putting the burden on their beneficiaries, their kids, family, things of that nature. And so when you look at the generational wealth begins with generational knowledge, what that simply says is this: we have to make sure that we prepare for that day, because all the money that we've amassed can be used to take care of me at my worst time, dementia, Parkinson, Alzheimer's, right? That's where the money can go. And we know that in some cases, just California alone, It's $7,000 per month to be in a facility today. That's what we do know. $7,000 a month. So we're talking about $94,000 a year. Who plans for that?
I don't know
And so
anyone.
we don't really plan for that aspect of it all. So it's so important for us to plan for that day. And we don't do that. So that's what, when I talk about generational wealth begins with generational knowledge, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that moment where we have to plan for that, because all the money, all the hard work that you've accomplished can be used to take care of you. That takes away from your beneficiaries. If we get to stage seven basically suggests that we've done all this work. So my analogy is that you, LaChanze, you are a tree rooted into the ground. You have these limbs, and within these limbs, fruit falls to the ground. Your beneficiaries, they're able to pick up the fruits and benefit from the fruits of your labor. To me, that's my visual of generational wealth. Generational wealth isn't for us. It's for those that are behind us. And oftentimes I hear the buzzwords of financial literacy and generational wealth. Literacy is linear, but how could you really, in my opinion, how could we get to generational wealth without generational knowledge? What's your thoughts on that?
What you're talking about, Dr. Wallace, is almost like a reprogramming of how I think you can get from 6 to 7. It is literally a reprogramming, which is why I think this is so important to view this model of yours, the 7 stages that you've so brilliantly created. Why it's so important is because it forces you to think about it in a way that would be strategic and relieve some of the stress and anxiety. One of the reasons I wanted to come on your show, and I'm so happy I'm on it, is because I wanted to challenge my own knowledge and have it put it in my own face of what I think I know. And I thought I knew until I met you and started talking to you about this. And why I was so invested in this is because going from 6 to 7, it may seem like, oh, it's just something you need to do. Here are the steps to it. Make sure you have everything else and get to that place of financial freedom. But you have to conquer all of those other steps in order to be solidly in 6 before you get to 7. And I think that's the challenge for me in particular, is that I vacillate, like you said, between the different stages. I am working hard to be comfortable and settled in 6 so that I can approach 7 healthily. But right now, Dr. Wallace, I'm a 5.5. At this point in the conversation, I think, okay, I can revisit what you said in the beginning. Where do you see yourself? I kind of think I'm a 5.5 now. In reflecting on the 7 stages, I can solidly say I'm a 5 with a little dust of 6 floating around a little bit there. Actually, let me rethink that. I'm a 6. Okay, I'm a 5 3/4. Okay, how about that? I'm a 5 3/4.
Well, we started, you was a 2.5.
Yeah.
Now we're at 5.54. I'm still 2%. I'm personally trying to get higher than 2%. And so we're both growing at the same time. Here's a final group of questions for you. So future wealth builders, again, we have to thank 3-time Tony Award winner LaChanze to the New Wealth Wave podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, as you can find us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and all of the social media platforms. Final couple of questions for you. 1, what do you want the listeners to take away from this podcast?
I would have to say, listeners, if there's one thing that you can take away from this particular podcast, is that as people, and specifically Black people, you are not your circumstances. And that's a great thing about this podcast, is that we are being challenged to look at ourselves and speak about the unspoken in a way that can just untether us from the experiences we've had as children and in young adulthood, growing up in the world and seeing the wealth around us. We can untether ourselves from those unspoken lessons and really become financially free. And I think that that's what I want people to take away from this podcast and our time together.
Well, you know what? You did a great job, because you moved from 2 to 5.5 again. We've watched it actually happen. We watched it in person. You can't beat that. So this question here is for you to tell all of our listeners, all of your listeners, tell them what you are doing now. What do you have on the horizon? You kind of mentioned it to me, but I'm going to let you kind of have this space. Tell them what you have on the horizon, what you're doing now, how you getting that money right now. Tell us what you're doing.
This is how I'm getting this money right now. You really want to know? Okay, so like we mentioned earlier, I am a 3-time Tony Award winning producer on Broadway. I'm actually, I'm really proud to be a Tony winning producer. I actually have 4 Tonys, by the way. I got 4. I got 3 as a producer and 1 as an actress so far. Several nominations, but got 4 pieces of metal up in my house. But the producing is what I'm so excited about. While I am still working as an actor, I just shot a movie with Spike Lee and Denzel and Jeffrey Wright coming out next summer sometime. But I'm really excited about that. But while I'm working as an actor, I am also taking control of my finances and opened a production company because I feel that the skills that I've learned in these 40 years of being in this industry are applicable to producing. And so I am now using my talent and skills that I have gleaned over these years as an artist and combine them with my entrepreneurship and my business mind so that I can create a space for young artists to see themselves in leadership position and to know that there's someone over on the other side who's actively seeking out work that is for that generation and for that generation to see themselves and to create future theater goers by participating in stories and producing stories that they are attracted to. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to create a whole new space for theater goers to come on in and see themselves and where we can all have some fun in theater and film and TV too.
And you are 4-time. My fault about that. I read 3, 4.
No, it's okay. It didn't come yet. I got 3. So technically I only got 3. 1 on the way.
There you go. The 3-time, 4-time, and we're going to put it in existence, hopefully 5. That's what it is. So tell our listeners how they can follow you on the socials and all that stuff.
I am Ms. LaChanze on Instagram and everywhere. LaChanze everywhere on YouTube. I'm LaChanze. I also have LaChanze Productions. You can go to my website, misslachanze.com, to learn everything about me. And if you're interested in learning about producing theater or wanting to produce theater or invest in theater, you can also shoot me an email and I'll help you out as much as I can.
And I tell you what, you are a beautiful soul. We've had a great conversation. I'm glad that you were able to kind of walk us through your ecosystem because, again, you're being vulnerable to the world, which is so important because we need to have people like yourself to come on and say, here are my issues, struggles, so to speak, but this is how I conquered them. This is where I'm at today. And again, you can do the same thing. I love how you mentioned how you reprogram your financial genetic code and you didn't know you were doing it, which was great. And how we literally took you from 2.5 today to 5.5. So that means this was a successful show. We went from 2.5 to 5 in one show. That's outstanding. So on behalf of the New Wealth Wave podcast guest, my producer, Ray Haycraft, we are so excited to have the 4-time, right? The one's on the way, Tony Award winner in the house, in the studio. And as we always say, future wealth builders, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. We'll see you on the next episode of the New Wealth Wave podcast. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the New Wealth Wave podcast.